Coming up, Kyrie Irving is an artist, and you got to watch him paint. The Brooklyn Nets hosted the crosstown rival New York Knicks and handled their business on their home court, giving you a performance not only from Kyrie, but from the team collectively, without several key players still getting the job done and taking the Nets fan base on the roller coaster ride that is the run without Kevin Durant. We break down Kyrie's game, the supporting cast, and how this game can be another stepping stone as the Nets move forward. All coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends. It is a Saturday night special where this is, of course, the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Not seen over there is one Doug Norrie, the owner-operator of DFSR, for all your daily fantasy sports rankings from DraftKings to FanDuel and covered over on YouTube. He's the man for the action. I'm Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast. My boy, Andy Mack. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day, free on all those great platforms, and let you know today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. And friends, we come in on a Saturday night taking on the New York Knicks, a team that has certainly had its ups and downs and is trying to find its own rhythm throughout this season. And with no Ben Simmons after going out with some knee soreness in the previous game, unavailable for this one. We have the contusion for TJ Warren, unavailable for this one. And obviously playing without Kevin Durant as he continues to recover from his injury. And listen, we're going to start at the top with Kyrie Irving, but we're also going to cover what this team did so well throughout this game that even though it came down to some close possessions, it really had to be Kyrie Irving that gave the final lift in the fourth quarter. This is a game that the Nets were ready for. They came to play for. And we've seen them take on some far lesser competition in recent games and not necessarily come out with the type of energy and the type of focus that you wanted to see. They had that in this game basically throughout. But Kyrie Irving, in the fourth quarter, when it matters most, put up some absolutely spectacular performances here. There's a couple of things that I thought were really the highlight ones, not just the clutch triples from the outside. And there's some great sequences when he drives the lane, kicks out to the perimeter to Joe Harris, the extra touch pass feed to the corner for Seth Curry, who knocks down a critical triple as well. But there's that moment when Kyrie basically takes it coast to coast, goes through the paint, works the Euro step, contorts the body, gets the layup with the hard English. That does just feel like something that, no, we don't take for granted, but we're so used to seeing from him. This was, I think, a 20-point performance in the fourth quarter. Might have only been 18. 12 of 27 from the field in this game. 5 of 12 from deep. Missed a couple in the fourth before knocking down those really critical ones. Only got to the line 6 times. Surprisingly, just 3 of 6 at the charity stripe, as a matter of fact, but 9 assists in this game. A really big performance from him, not only closing things out in the fourth, but also being a table setter throughout the early portions of this game. And at a high level, before we talk about the supporting cast, this one in a lot of ways, at least for me coming into it, felt like one of those games with no Kevin Durant, no Ben Simmons, no TJ Warren, trying to figure a lot of things out for this team right now. Right for the Knicks to come in, make a statement. There were some fans. There was a good chunk of Knicks fans in Barclays Center for sure. They started to get loud in the fourth quarter as this rally was getting built upon. And it felt ripe for one of those, you're not going to look back in 2 months from now and think anything about the L in the schedule, but it does kind of matter. When you play the Knicks, it does matter, especially when we go back to this offseason. We know the Knicks tried to make a sizable improvement, bringing in Jalen Brunson, didn't take the big swing to go get Donovan Mitchell per se. But then you also have this renaissance from Julius Randle and what he's done this year, which feels far closer to 2 years ago when he was a most improved player in the NBA, as opposed to last season when fans on that side of the city were calling for them to dump his contract and that player. All of those things just conspire to feel like it's going to be a hard lift. And Doug and I were texting. He's unable, obviously, to make the show, but we were texting ahead of this game and just saying, this is what it feels like. It feels like maybe a letdown moment. And we know, because now this marks just the third victory in the absence of Kevin Durant. And they've struggled against, regardless of competition, a lot of teams without their other superstar out there on the court. And that's what really made this feel like a nice win, a big win. And a game, oddly enough, we'll talk about in a second here, that some of the matchups really played actually into the Nets' favor that I didn't think they were going to. Julius Randle is a real concern from a defensive standpoint when you don't have Ben Simmons out there available for you, and when you don't have even Kevin Durant to create problems on both ends of the floor and maybe put Julius Randle in a more difficult spot. He still got his in this game, obviously, but 19 points on 7 of 16 shooting, no, that is not the type of dominant performance that I thought he would put out there in this one. So we'll talk a little bit about the things that I think really worked well for the Nets all the way from top to bottom. But the biggest and most important one was Kyrie Irving is the lone superstar right now out there for the Brooklyn Nets. And I've talked about, I won't say Doug as well, but we have collectively discussed how when he takes 15 shots in a game and you lose by 5 to 7, you want him to take 25. When he takes 27 shots in a game and you win, it's perfect, right? It's always these variables of what is he doing and does he need to be doing more of one thing or the other. I think he perfectly had the temperature and tempo of this game. He understood when to push for his teammates and when to take it over. And this was a really complete leadership kind of game for Kyrie Irving that I think we can just be excited about and sit back and enjoy the fact that he carried you home in the fourth. Coming up here in a second, want to talk about everybody else. I specifically am trying to avoid hitting on all the other players that had key contributing performances here in this one. No loss counts for more than one in the column. No win counts for one more in the column. But I always appreciate when the Nets handle their business against the New York Knicks. So before we get into that, got to let you know about our friends over at, oh, you guessed it, LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs help you to quickly attract qualified candidates for your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data, and they also are going to go ahead and connect you with think about this number, by the way. They have over 875 million member profiles. They're going to sift through all the data. They're going to pluck out the best ones for your position and then get them in front of you so you can interview them, contact them, connect with them, all for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all on one platform. Maybe the New York Knicks are looking for somebody that can step up and be a leader for their team. It's not a shot. It's just saying, if you need something, you can go shopping for a qualified candidate over on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your jobs for free. Terms and conditions, they do apply. So when we turn our attention then to the supporting cast, and I think it's important, if not for the fourth quarter and the way in which Kyrie Irving took this one over and helped close out the New York Knicks, I think we would have come in here initially and said, great team performance, great contributions across the board. And that's because we had just spent time speaking about Royce O'Neal and how he's been this very up and down. The consistency hasn't always been there. Sometimes we knock what's happening on the defensive end of the floor as well. But in a game like this, and it's surprising, you say 36 minutes, just 4 of 10. Well, those 4 makes were all from beyond the arc, 4 of 7 from deep, 2 of 2 when he got to the line, gave you 5 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, 14 points in this game. And inside of it as well was some of the things that he did defensively, because everyone was wondering who's going to pick up that assignment against Julius Randle. It ended up being, for large stretches, one-on-one coverage with Royce O'Neal on him. And this is a difference between going back to last year and thinking about personnel and maybe not having enough size, enough bulk. Royce O'Neal has that has enough mass and uses that low center of gravity relative to Julius Randle to make it frustrating, to keep him a little bit further out of the paint, to not let him get right in close and around the basket. So I thought he gave a really solid performance on both ends of the floor, obviously, and he knocked down the first triple of the game. And as soon as that happens, you know it's going to be more 4 of 7 and less 1 of 8. It's always, if it starts out hot, Royce is going to be consistent. If he's looking cold, he's probably going to stay cold. And then you also get 407 from Joe Harris. And it's funny because we just spent time talking about Royce and Joe and Curry and their up and down games. But then in this performance, you get that 407 from Harris. You also get 2 of 3 from Curry, 14 points. Mentioned, the clutch bucket in the corner on the extra feed from Joe Harris. But Curry also worked the mid-range game, 5 of 9 overall. So he only took 9 shots in this game, and 6 of them were inside the arc. And when you have guys like Royce and Joe knocking down their perimeter looks, it makes it a lot easier, I think, especially in this game when he gets inserted in the starting lineup for the third straight contest, to go ahead and lean into a little bit more of that, right? And this is that balancing piece, especially when you're not only without Kevin Durant, but also just other members of this roster. And none of those guys are going to be at the level from a perimeter shooting standpoint. But not having a TJ Warren, that matters because he can be an on-ball creator, right? He can take a guy one-on-one, work into the mid-range game, get some of those shots off for you. So while there's been instances when Curry has struggled to take over in a different role than you typically want him in, did an excellent job in this game supplementing what Kyrie did with his 32 points. So you get Royce with 14, you get 16 from Joe Harris, and then you get another 14 from Curry. All those things mattered. And frankly, the other thing that's nice about a matchup like this is as good as Jalen Brunson has been for the New York Knicks, and in this game gave you 26 points on 10 and 19, got to the line 6 times, perfect from the stripe there, and also kicked in not only 4 assists. I actually thought he had a few more, but he's not the biggest guy in the world, right? So this affords you a little bit when you're Jacques Vaughn and you're running early in this contest. When we think about those minute shares that went out early in this game, first half, saw some Patty Mills, saw a bit of Sumner, right? Saw Cam Thomas, and then you start to tighten things up as you work your way down towards the stretch of this game. But getting 10 minutes from Thomas and Mills specifically, because Sumner has his own length there, you can afford to have those guys out there without absolutely getting beaten up on these switches because Brunson is undersized. So as long as you can stay in front of him, play as good as defense as you can put forward, it's not a losing matchup when you feel like we look at these games often and say, bigger backcourts, hey, they're going to be looking to switch, get the better matchup, and go to work. So I thought that was actually something that played into the Nets' hands in this game. And when you get specifically through those 3 players, the backcourt members that contributed early in this one, it's 3 of 7 from Patty, it's 2 of 4 from Sumner, it's 2 of 5 from Cam Thomas. Patty was just 1 of 5 from beyond the arc. Love him, just keep the mid-range working if that's what's happening for you. But those 3 players combined for 18 points off the bench, right? Those are significant numbers when you're playing as shorthanded as they are. TJ Warren, he's a guy that's far more capable of giving you 15 to 20 coming off the bench on a night in, night out basis, even with his minute restrictions. So you needed guys to combine to get that job done. And then we even give a little tip of the hat to Yuta Watanabe, who in 17 minutes went 3 of 4, perfect 3 of 3 from downtown, 9 points on the evening for him as well. So all these things combined to really give the Nets an easy path forward for victory here. However, the one thing that we want to highlight about this at the highest possible level is when you go inside the box score of this game, the Nets have struggled, as we've said, without Kevin Durant. But when you're going to shoot 22 of 40 from beyond the arc, which is well over their season average for attempts, they're closer to 30 in terms of attempts per game from deep. When you're going to hit 55%, you're going to win games, right? And 10 of 28 for the New York Knicks, they're just 35%. We usually say, it's not as simple as, but especially, again, without key players, we have to play a different style here. If you come out in this game and Royce is off, if Joe isn't hitting a handful of his shots, if you're not getting that perimeter game to work for you, this one could have gone a very different direction because then there is some size for the New York Knicks that they can use on the outside, right? Getting those open looks are going to be a little bit harder for the Nets to come by with consistency. So 5 or 6, shooting closer to your season percentage from deep, this one could have gone the other way in a hurry, especially when you look inside some of these other stats. The Nets were only at the line 14 times, just 19, a relatively clean game, 19 trips for the Knicks there, but the Nets only shot 57% from there. Lost the rebound battle, 45-35. The assist numbers are what you absolutely love in this game. We mentioned 9 for Kyrie Irving in this one. You have 31 assists on a total of 46 made buckets from the field. That, again, is a recipe for success when Kevin Durant is playing, but even more so when you're without him, because it's about the extra ball movement, finding the open shooters, finding those passes, and making the right play. And that starts top down from Kyrie Irving. And if we tap back into just those overall numbers, how about 3 assists from Royce O'Neal to complement his game? And then these numbers don't seem large, but when you talk about Watanabe playing 17 minutes, Mills 11, Sumner 10, and each one of them having 2 assists apiece as well, those are guys that came in, stepped into the rhythm of the game and the flow that they were working with and said, yes, that's what it needs to be. Can't come in, don't need to play hero ball, wait for my opportunities and take advantage of them. So I thought that this is one of the most consistent performances from tip to final buzzer that this team has had without Kevin Durant in the lineup. And remember, we liked the game against the Philadelphia 76ers a couple nights ago, but you lost the game. So you can only go so far in your praise of things that you saw out there when you understand that there is this missing component, getting the W. Tonight, they got the job done. The other thing that we obviously have to talk about here is going to be Nicholas Claxton, but also a little touch on Dayron Sharp, because you needed somebody else to be able to step up in this game at the center position and give you some quality minutes. And I was borderline shocked by how consistent, just 14 minutes, but how consistent Dayron Sharp was able to play. We'll talk about what seems to be some of the discussion around this team and what they're going to pursue at the deadline here. But most importantly, the key performance, as I say, from one Nicholas Claxton and how his game continues to evolve. Before we do that, though, my friends, we have to tell you about the new sponsor that we're absolutely elated about, and that is, of course, FanDuel. We are really excited about our new sports betting partner because they are the number one sports book in America, and that is FanDuel. You know that right now, new customers join today and can get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just one $5 bet, and you're going to get $150 in free bets. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/LockedOnNBA. They got you covered for all your favorite bets, from the money lines to point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance to win bigger payouts with the same game parlay. You go over there right now. We know that obviously the NFL is going on here. We're down to the conference championships. Doug told you the other day, man. Listen, I get it. San Francisco, you're worried about it. But before I'm not going to talk about it just yet. Nicholas Claxton right now for most improved player, it's plus 2,300. I'm just saying, if you want to put some money on somebody that you want to feel good about, I think Nicholas Claxton is going to be a lot closer to the top of that list by the end of the season than maybe people realize right now. He is sitting behind Markkanen and SGA and Brunson, by the way, and there he is sitting fourth, though. Get some value on your money. Go ahead and drop it in there. But don't worry, because when you get over there and you think about football and you think about that game that I just mentioned, plus 2.5, San Francisco coming East Coast, take on the Eagles. There's just no world where I'm taking anyone that is called an Eagle. Anything that's Philadelphia in front of the team name, can't do it. I got my money, on the 49ers. So I might even just take them straight up money line plus 132. And I got those Bengals as well, plus 1.5 taking on Kansas City. So you get over there to FanDuel.com. Like we told you, man, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet and get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/LockedOnNBA. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Okay. Nicholas Claxton, which you may have heard me just mention, most improved player, opportunity to make some cash on him. This game, 35 minutes, 6 for 6 from the field, helping his league leading field goal percentage, because 100% is always going to improve that number. He ended up kicking in 13 points, 3 blocks. Once again, another 3 block or more game for him. That streak continues now. I think he's entering the atmosphere of only one of like 4 or 5 other players that a streak this long in NBA history since the block stat was being calculated back in like the early 70s. So he's actually doing something historic right now over the course of this season. But how about this though, man? 12 rebounds, fantastic. Said the 13 points, love it. 6 assists. And if you go back and remember, I had said when we talk about the evolution of his game and what comes next, I made mention of a tweet that I had put out, I think going back like last week, 2 weeks ago, where I believe that he can be a guy that gives you 5+ assists per game with consistency as he continues to develop in his career. The all-around game is just an absolutely phenomenal. He met, who did he meet at the rim? I got to pull it up here so I remember. I think it was McBride. Met McBride right at the rim, shoved that one right back in his face on the stuff block. And it's becoming old hat now. He's doing it with consistency, and he's doing it in a way that makes it reliable. What I'm going to find very interesting is what happens here as you move forward, because you play this game without Ben Simmons, and we know we're waiting on, dreaming on, hoping on, thinking on what Ben Simmons could be and how it can elevate what this team could be long-term from a championship standpoint. We also have to accept the fact that in a game you won 122, 115, by the way, much better in terms of the amount of points you're giving up, obviously, but a game where now the Nets advance themselves to 30-19, 14-8 at home. Nicholas Claxton's the third best player on this team. And once upon a time when we talked about him being the third best player and saying that may create a ceiling, there's still things that have to happen here, but I'm getting closer and closer to saying how much more is he going to grow over the next 30 games here as the season continues to roll on towards the playoffs, right? What are we? 49 games through right now. He's got another 30 plus games. We don't know what the next little step could be. And if something like this, and we mentioned this going back to the start of last season, when we thought about his game, it was, well, he needs to start eliminating that extra gather where he brings the ball down low and around the basket. And he started to do that last year. And then on the tail end of the season, him and Kevin Durant started to say, boy, he's starting to find a little bit more rhythm here when he's working in the open court and getting some of those lead passes into the lane, much better with his hands, much better with his footwork, a lot better fluidity. And now this year, the defense has gone to a whole nother level. The confidence has gone to a whole nother level. But now it's also, okay, the handling, the footwork, the fluidity around the basket, going up and attacking, but also making that extra smart basketball play. If you can start to think about him down in the paint and also being able to push it back outside to perimeter shooters, that's a new wrinkle. That's another facet to his game. And if he expands to that, you can at least start to think about what Sean Marks might try to do here at the deadline, and how if we just have to accept what Ben Simmons, I'm going to say, is not right now, not what he is, but what he is not, you can start to think about how Nicholas Claxton can be that featured player at the 5, and he can do all of the things you need him to in order to have success when Kevin Durant is there, when Kyrie Irving is there, when you have the full complement of players around him. And I made the note here, closing out that last segment, that there's been rumblings that what Sean Marks and the Nets wanted to do as they move towards the deadline, where it's expected they're going to make a move, is they wanted to try to find some way to see if Nicholas Claxton and then Dayron Sharp, of all the names to hear, if it was possible that Dayron could be get a little bit of run and show that he's capable of being a supplemental player. Now, do I think that all of a sudden it's going to be Dayron Sharp playing even 14, 15 minutes a night? No. However, we've seen sample sizes from the only other places that you look on this roster is either going small, obviously maybe adding a piece on the market, or looking at a guy like Markieff Morris who's struggled, right? The perimeter shot hasn't been there for him. He just looks like he's lost a step. So he's one of those veteran players that you can be happy to have in the locker room, but he's not necessarily going to move the needle on the court. I really thought that this was a game where Dayron Sharp, if we want to talk about developing and taking that next step, and this is just, I want to make sure we make note of it because it's a baby step in the right direction and hopefully a positive sign. This matchup is better suited for him. And Doug has highlighted this all season long. What we haven't seen a lot of Dayron is because there's a lot of bad matchups where he can get beaten up, especially on the defensive end, can accumulate a lot of fouls, and just becomes difficult. But in this game, when he gives you 14 minutes, 3 of 6 from the field, there were a couple of clunky plays, obviously, but he was incredibly active. He was incredibly active. And even though it's 14 minutes and it's just 3 rebounds, they're all offensive rebounds. And that's an area that the Nets struggle with, right? Second chance opportunities, second chance points. If he can be a little bit of that, especially on that end of the floor, that's a nice dynamic to play off of Nicholas Claxton, who can make his bread and butter on the defensive end with those blocks, with the versatility defensively. And frankly, I thought that Dayron held up fine on the defensive end, right? He held up fine. He only picked up 1 foul across those 14 minutes. It's just 6 points, but it's a really nice sample size. And just, the bench overall, I think, is a good way to cap this game off. You got a combined 15, 22, 27, 33 points from the bench. It matters. Now, your starting rotation had double digits across the board. Nobody other than Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving had 32. Nobody else even reached 20. but you had 14, 16, 13, and 14 from O'Neal, Harris, Claxton, and Curry. And then you throw in 30 points off the bench with consistent shooting, by the way, because the bench, although Patty Mills is included in this number, they still shot 7 of 11 from deep. And that's with the 1 for 5 from Patty Mills mixed in there. So the fact that they were able to give you that consistent punch really mattered. Cam Thomas, even his 13 minutes, good enough. +7 when he was on the court for whatever that's worth. Had a couple of steals in this game as well. So active hands, the bench contributing, and maybe just getting this little sample size from some of the young players. Most importantly, in the short term, between now and the All-Star break, and hopefully when we see Kevin Durant coming back after the break, I know everyone is pushing for before the All-Star game, but even if it's after, you still need to know that you can hopefully go to some of these guys for these games and get some critical wins. Because when we look over at the standings and knowing that you lost to Philadelphia and that put distance between you and them as they look to maybe chase down 2 games back from the Eastern Conference leading Boston Celtics, but you're still just 4.5 out from first. You're 2 games back of Milwaukee, 2.5 back from Philadelphia. You hold a 1-game lead over Cleveland in the 5 spot, and then Miami is there 2.5 back from you in the 6th, right? So like the treading water thing hasn't been perfect here, but they are still managing to do it. And when you can look at them and say that they're 4-6 in their last 10 games, it's not terrible. Now, if you went in and look at the teams that they played, there's some other narratives that you can build around that, which just has to do with consistency. But in large part, I really think that when you walk out of a 122-115 victory over the New York Knicks with a performance like this from Kyrie Irving, again, showing leadership, understanding kind of the tempo of the game, picking his spots, and then everyone really kicking in and contributing, it at least makes you squint and say, yes, lost those 4 games coming out, won back-to-back against Utah and Golden State, lost back-to-back against Philadelphia and Detroit of all teams, but you grabbed the win against the Knicks. And now here, the tricky part is you're going to get the Lakers, who are certainly playing good basketball right now. They picked up Rui Hachimura in a trade. That's going to be a really difficult matchup, especially from a size standpoint across the board, as Anthony Davis is supposed to be coming back here. Then Boston. Then you get Washington mixed in, but then the Clippers. So there's a difficult stretch coming up here as we look towards the beginning of February and that trade deadline. But it's only 5 games before the trade deadline on February 7th. So Sean Marks is going to make a move. I would expect and anticipate it to be coming here sooner than later. We've also heard some things about buyout market guys as well. Will Barton has been talked about a little bit. We made mention of Naz Reid. Doug mentioned Crowder on last episode on Friday's podcast. We're going to get into them a little bit more. Obviously, post-game pod here. Monday night, they have a game again. But throughout this week, over the next couple of days, we're going to try to do everything we can to touch in on some of these players that they can pursue. What are the asking prices going to be? And whether or not, supposedly, I'll leave you with this on the trade market front. Seth Curry, Joe Harris, Patty Mills, these are the guys that are being talked about as being able to have some level of financial value to facilitate, obviously perimeter shooters, but that combined with a Cam Thomas, with a draft pick, that may be the needle mover in some of these trades. And what we're hearing is that the Nets may be willing to sacrifice some perimeter shooting to give themselves a little more stability in the front court. We've talked about, obviously, a lot about wanting to add a defensive-minded 3-and-D kind of backcourt member as well. The tricky part is going to be the asking price on some of these guys. Caruso may still maybe be on the table potentially, but the asking price, as everyone is hearing, is going to be astronomical. The Nets aren't going to be able to dance in those waters. So how far can they push this? And what can some of these role players prove over the next 2 or 3 games? And this is showcase time right now for these guys to either be here or to be someone who is attractive for another team to come get, depending on where the price tag is for the player you want to acquire. And then also, what's the salary going out? We know $6 million, little north of that for Patty Mills. Again, I'd be surprised, but it's at least been speculated, maybe him. Joe Harris with a monster $18+ million, $8 million, a little bit more for Seth Curry. So there's options here. We'll break all that stuff down. The best thing that we get to break down is that the New York Knicks lost in the Barclays Center to our Brooklyn Nets, and they get one more win chalked up on the board. Next up for Brooklyn, Monday night, that's going to be the LA Lakers at home at the Barclays Center. Doug and I will be back in for the post-game live following that. And that's why you need to be over on YouTube, subscribing, setting your alerts so you hear when we go live on the post games. We stick around afterwards. So you're only getting half the fun right now as we hang out, get into the chat where everybody does an excellent job throwing up questions, speculating, maybe just doing a little bit of city rivalry brouhahaing after a game like this. So be a part of that and get us on that podcast feed. And as I always say, with no Doug Norrie, there is no quote, short of saying that I miss my friend. And I can't wait until he's back here by my side so we can keep talking all things Brooklyn Nets basketball. All right, my friends, it is the Post podcast live on YouTube. In the comments, shout it out, man. At Locked On Nets, if you have any questions, comments. I won't run as long since it's just me flying solo here. Obviously, a great game. I can already see there's a lot of Ben Simmons conversation happening here, which is what you would expect. And it'll be interesting here, too, depending on what happens and if Ben Simmons is going to be available tomorrow night or not, listed as day-to-day right now. I have to check in here on what they said about TJ Warren with the lower leg is also day-to-day. I thought it was going to be day-to-day. That's what it is. So if either one of those guys is going to be available or not, that'll be a big factor in what happens on Monday night. Different type of matchup, different type of challenge. You're not going to have a lot of easy answers for LeBron James. You're not going to have a lot of easy answers, even for Rui Hachimura, who's had some nice debuts here for the Lakers, at least one game under his belt. I don't know if it was more than that. So it's going to be interesting, though, to see what happens. But if you have something you want to get into, like Clash Bandicoot, what's good, man? Oh, thank you, sir. Yeah, everyone like and subscribe. I thought I didn't know what you were going to ask or say, but since it is a compliment and a request, I say everyone follow Clash's lead, man. This was a really good game. This was a fun game. Like I said, obviously you didn't see Doug Norrie in here. He wasn't able to get to make the post game. It's a weekend game. We say if we can, we want to do as many as possible. But going into this game, we did not have a high level of optimism about this matchup and just about coming off a loss to Detroit. The Knicks, they're trying to have a surge here if you're the New York Knicks, and they do seem to trip over themselves a little bit. But I was not, I was not ecstatic about this game. So I was pleasantly surprised when the Nets got out to double-digit leads and then held that for the bulk of this game, and were also able to answer the bell. It was the perfect combination. Team effort all the way through, big performances from guys stepping up, and then Kyrie Irving go ahead and captain things off for you in the fourth quarter. Thoughts on Mo Bamba if we can acquire him? Yeah, fantastic all-around game from the entire team. Always a pleasure to see the Knicks. Yeah, well, it is, dude. We try to, we had Locked On Knicks. They're on here. Alex, good guys. They're great guys. So we try not to throw too much, but it does always feel good. Yeah, there's on the short list. They got Mo Bamba on there. We're hearing Naz Reid on there. I don't, there's some of the veteran guys that are getting thrown around there. I've seen people mention Dwight Howard. I don't see any instance of that. I said last time, and Mo Bamba obviously falls into this one. And going younger, if you are the Nets in this situation, I like the upside of that. Because if you go back and think about some of the other moves the Nets have made, and we talked about this before, the deadline deals, the buyout market guys, all that stuff, it's all well and good, but it doesn't help you in anything beyond the immediate. And that's okay. Like, you can go in on it. You can go all in on it and say, we want to win right now, and we don't care about what happens in the offseason. Next season, we'll deal with that when it comes. But like Naz Reid or like a Mo Bamba, who's just 24 years old and would instantly be the tallest player on the team at 7 foot and has 231, has a little bit of that weight there to him as well. It'd be nice if you thought whatever Dayron Sharp is going to be, and there's even been some speculation, by the way, that he's a guy that the Nets maybe would be open to moving, not for anything in particular, not a part of a deal that moves the needle, but just to be able to shift away from a young player like that maybe isn't going to be the answer long-term, and bring in someone else that you can pair with Nicholas Claxton going forward. The thing you like about Mo Bamba is I'm just going to go strictly inside of his season stats right now. This season, and this is what's beautiful about it, in the last 2 seasons really for him. So he's not only, but last year he took 4 perimeter shots a game, 4 3-pointers a game, knocking down 38%. This year he's down to just a little over 2.5, but still knocking down 39%. So this is that stretch, right? Last time we talked about Naz Reid and who's being mentioned, Serge Ibaka, and it was pretty easy, like, not to want to be a part of the Serge Ibaka talk because there's a good chance that I think he's just cooked. But Mo Bamba would be a guy, hey, this is the way that you create some of those things. And if we talk about Ben Simmons and Claxton playing together and neither one of them having a perimeter shot, well, now all of a sudden you could put a player like that, a player like Nasri, who also has a perimeter shot to his game, on the floor and provide some of the spacing and some of the defensive, offensive value and a little bit of that size. Y'all talking about Ben being traded is crazy. Ben is hurt. Yeah. And somebody else asked here about, do I think that Jacques Vaughn believes in Ben Simmons? I mean, it's hard for anyone to believe in Ben Simmons right now. And that last comment too, like, it's true. The Nets, I mean, Ben Simmons is still clearly dealing with stuff. Last episode, when he left the game, and we were saying taking it at face value, right? Something happened there. We highlighted when you have a back issue and the way that it's connected right down to your knees, and the way that, when you have, if your back gets inflamed, then you can run into issues with your knees getting sore, getting tired, not having the same lift, not having the same ability, not the same energy. So, like, I think that he's trying to do the both and play through getting back from this injury and also getting better, like just getting better, right? And it's hard to, people have brought up like the trade going back to Harden. It doesn't matter. Like at that point, you're trying to get whatever you can get back, and you also kind of have to match money in a lot of ways in that kind of deal. So I don't think it's really about whether or not you got hoodwinked at the deadline, whatever. You took a shot on a guy that was injured and you're hoping can get back to it. I think the problem this year, probably for Simmons, is that if he's still dealing with the injury, but the Nets, they need to win now. So you're trying to get a guy to get to a place where you can rely on him for consistency, because without him, and this is what we talked about too, is you got to go another way. So I think that, and I said this last time to Doug too, I think that if you look at Ben Simmons as being a guy that can consider him like a bench player, a specialist who, when he comes onto the court, he can set up shooters, fantastic. He can run the floor in open spaces. He's not going to get into the basket. He's not going to be a scorer, but he can be a defensive weapon. He's versatile on that end of the floor. If you think about him that way, then I think you can watch his game and be excited about it. The real problem, as Doug mentioned too, was, but can I count on him to be able to be there, even to be that lesser version of him? Because right now there's a chance that every 5 to 10 games, there's going to be something that comes up for him from an injury standpoint. So it's brutal. And I don't know. I think there's frustration for Ben Simmons, first and foremost. I think there's probably frustration for the team, for the coach. Yeah, it's a difficult spot right now. And that's why I think you'll see the Nets make some type of move here that safeguards against what they thought they could be with a 70% Ben Simmons, to where what he is now and what they're not going to get from him over the rest of the season in the playoffs. And that's the benefit of having Claxton evolve and step up the way that he has this year. Without Claxton, think about if it was Claxton from last year. This would be a mess for the Nets. They'd have nobody. They would have no one to consistently put out there at center. By the way, good reminder here too, that when we talk about Nicholas Claxton, I just thought I'd throw this out there as well, because it's a fantastic stat. And Doug had mentioned like how many games, like 40% of his career games have been played this season already. That's how little that he's played in his career to this point, even though he's been in the league for 4 seasons. Think about the fact that now in this year, so from 2019, when he came into the league, 12 and a half minutes a game, 18 and a half minutes a game, 21 almost minutes a game, 29 and a half minutes per game he's playing this season. And over this stretch without Kevin Durant, they have now gone to Nicholas Claxton 35, 33, 38, 36, 38, 35. They are leaning into him as much as humanly possible because they need to. And he keeps answering the bell. The performances have only gotten better. He's only been more consistent. It's a shame that he was 1 of 4 at the line tonight, because the last 2 games prior, he was 8 of 13 combined, maybe starting to find a little something there. But the rebounding numbers, double digits in his last 4. It's just been so nice to see his game grow. But imagine if it was Ben Simmons like this and Nicholas Claxton still being an inconsistent player that could only give you 20 minutes a night. They would have had to made a move, so much earlier than this, regardless of the injury to Kevin Durant. But Nicholas Claxton soliloquy over. anything else anybody else wants to come in on, feel free to hop into the conversation. Other than that, though, I did highlight there at the end of the episode. Remember, so the Nets, when they get coming up here, the hard part is you get this win, and that's nice. Now the problem becomes, though, that you have to figure out getting through this next stretch of the schedule as you move towards that deadline. The Lakers, the Celtics, even the Clippers, who have been an up-and-town team trying to figure themselves out. But you have them, Phoenix now with Johnson back on the floor for them, obviously. Chicago's been playing better basketball. These are going to be difficult games in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you can even, this is going beyond the deadline, but 6 when you include a rematch with the 76ers, right? So 6 out of the next 7 games are going to be really hard matchups. So depending on where Kevin Durant is when he gets reevaluated, that was from I think it was the 23rd that they said, another 2 weeks. So you're going to put them right around, LA, Phoenix game, 6th, 7th of February. So you got to try to find a way to get another couple wins out of this run here. And that may take a Herculean performance from Kyrie Irving or just some consistent performances like we got from tonight. They can win against anybody, even without Kevin Durant, if you get that type of supporting cast play from Royce O'Neal, from Joe Harris, and from a couple of guys coming off the bench as well. Will you guys do a trade? Yeah, where are we going to be? So let me because I had mentioned this last episode and people have been asking. I was going to, depending on how this one went, I was going to spend some time talking about trade targets even in tonight's episode, but with the win and the way in which they won, it felt worth doing. So we'll do, I haven't confirmed this with Doug, but the idea would be probably to spend like 2.5 segments as we break down our episodes talking about LA and then spend the back end of the episode discussing some trade conversations and some targets. They won't play until Wednesday night. So Tuesday is going to be one where we'll really dive in on a lot of guys, where the rumors are, where we think the realistic targets are, and then even highlighting some buyout market guys too. So we'll have it on Tuesday. That'll probably be like a trade market focused one. And then Friday's episode as well, because Wednesday night we'll do the post game for Boston. That'll go up on Thursday. And then Friday's episode will be another one where we're looking around the league, update things, because we've kind of seen this now. Every 36 to 48 hours, you're getting a little bit more information. And a lot of it can just be where other teams are expected to be in on, some other spots that teams are going to be in on, and names that aren't being mentioned that include the Brooklyn Nets. Let's do that real quick here. And let me just get up Iceman here. Who is the player you think Marks really goes after? So it's funny. If I pull up here, and then I'll get to you too, Zay, about Kyrie. I think so far the Naz Reid conversation seems to be the one with the most traction right now when it comes to the Nets. They've inquired about him. I'm very curious about, you have conflicting things about buyout market targets that are being talked about a little bit. I mentioned Barton in the episode. And then you're hearing that the Nets are going to be active before the deadline. So the difference between trading for guys and waiting for guys. And it sounds like they're going to be. But I want to see if I can find, there was a good list that updated kind of the players that are being attached to teams. And by and large, the Nets are not being associated with them. Some people have thrown out Mason Plumlee. I think there's 2 or 3 other teams that are going to go after him. I don't think I would want Mason Plumlee. Not that I wouldn't take Mason Plumlee. But there's been other teams that have been talked about with him. There's none of the high profile guys. Pirtle is a guy that I think a lot of teams are going to be interested in. And I don't think that the Nets are going to be able to be in those conversations on that either. So right now, Naz Reid, maybe a Mo Bamba. And there's a couple of veterans, but those 2 players right now would probably be at the top of my list. And again, that's out of not only about fit and the value they bring, but then also the long term, because they're younger and you can think about keeping them here. I'd still like them to see them go after somebody else for the backcourt, especially if getting a Naz Reid, if getting a Mo Bamba or anyone comes at the cost of giving up one of the backcourt players. Maybe it's a Cam Thomas and he doesn't play a lot, but you're still going to have to think about adding some value there as well. Maybe they stay a little bit more focused on the buyout market to add that kind of depth. and I'm going to get back to the trade thing too, because I want to find this list that I was looking at earlier today. Do I think that Kyrie is earning it? Yeah, I don't, a lot of like Kyrie earning a new contract. I mean, there's the basketball side of it, as Doug and I have always said. It's always great. it's always phenomenal. And Doug would say that you're tied to this. You're tied to Kyrie Irving with Kevin Durant for as long as Kevin Durant is with Brooklyn, because if Kyrie Irving, say they don't re-sign him and he just walks away this offseason, because Ben Simmons' contract is there and still Joe Harris, which is also a factor here around the deadline, but because of everything you have on the books, you're still going to be over the tax threshold. So you can't just go out and pick up a $35-40 million guy to replace Kyrie. So that's a big factor in it. And then there's just the talent side of it. Listen, if Kyrie is going to play the way that he's playing like this, and we understand it hasn't been, the media has never done Kyrie any favors in terms of the way that they interact with him or vice versa. But if it's this, yeah, of course. Of course. Maybe they just sign him on an extension that puts him in line with Kevin Durant's contract, so that when Kevin Durant's contract comes up, if he's not coming back here, whatever, will be 30, check how old he'd be, 36 or 7. If it's not going to come back here, then everyone can move on, and the Nets will go into a true rebuild, right? But it's never been about his on-court talent, but it's always been the reality of, you need to have a Kevin Durant with Kyrie Irving to maximize Kyrie Irving's value, right? Kevin Durant by himself, we saw this last year with a bunch of rookies, he can go out and lead and win ball games for you. That's that type of talent when you have that skill set and that size, etc. So yeah, I wouldn't have any problem with Kyrie Irving having the extension. I don't know if those conversations need to happen now, if I'm being honest, because I do think you want to keep, for everybody involved, by the way, I think you do want to keep all your options open. And I understand why Kyrie would prefer to have an extension done and have it be settled and know that beyond this season, he's going to be in Brooklyn. If the Raptors end up becoming sellers before the trade deadline, do you think we realistically go after on the Raptors? Well, it's not going to be OG. I'm not saying you were suggesting that, but I'll tell you that it's not going to be OG. It's not going to be, I don't think it would be, it's not going to be a Gary Trent Jr. Other guy, it's not going to be Fred VanVleet. I'm just, thinking about these guys here. You want to talk about maybe a Boucher? You could think about a Boucher potentially being a guy that you could go after. Again, he's only, he's not really a 3-point shooter. He does some nice things for you. I don't know what the asking price would be there, but you're not going to get any of the high profile guys, I don't think. And a guy that, oddly enough, who's done such a good job of changing what he is as a player after being with Miami is Precious Achiuwa, right? And he just came back from injury recently, but he's done such a great job adding in the 3-point shooting, becoming just one of those, just those grunt kind of guys that grinds it out, steps up into the starting rotation for a handful of games too. But he gets you the rebounds. He does a little bit of everything for you. He's a great player. And he's still young. So I think that they would, at least for now, look at him and say, 23 years old, if we're going to move off of a VanVleet and OG because of the contract size, and you don't want to be the one who's paying him on his next contract potentially. It's going to be one of those max kind of deals. I could see them jettisoning a couple of those guys. VanVleet, though, who has been talked about, you're hearing so many other teams that are going to be in those discussions too. Again, it's not about if I think the Nets, and I know, and this is the way you phrase the question, not if they should, it's if they could. And I don't think that they can go after any of the higher profile guys, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. What do we have? What do we got here? Do you think if Claxton develops a jump shot in 2 years, he'll be the next AD? No, because AD, I mean, I know what you mean. I mean, AD has a perimeter shot as well. AD is, I don't know, 50 pounds. He's significantly bigger than Claxton, so he can play a much more physical game. Honestly, I said this going back, like, if you think about the way that you think about Ben, and this is why I talk about the assists. So the most important thing that Claxton can add next would be the mid-range jump shot, right? And we saw him make one of those, I think, going back to the Phoenix game. If he adds the mid-range jumper, well, now he's a guy that can come out away from the basket and, hit an elbow jump shot. That's significant, because if you're going to play with another potential big, a guy that can be a little more physical potentially, even if it's at the 4 or the 5, whatever positionless. You want someone else to be able to crash the boards and then to have to respect Claxton. And then Claxton has already shown this year. He's shown the ability to turn face up, take a guy off the dribble. He's done a couple of little, pseudo Euro steps. He's been good with his offhand at times as well. So there's those are the kind of things that I think that his game is going to become more graceful offensively as opposed to becoming more bullish like Anthony Davis rightfully when he gets himself in those spots where he can turn and get aggressive and go towards the basket. And he has the baseline jump shot. He has the all-around offensive game. It's not that. I just don't know if I would I don't know if I would put those I wouldn't put those guys as like the comps with one another. Needs to add just a little bit more size and a jump shot. Yeah. Yeah, and another good point there is the switches down low, and it's also like think about him setting the screens right. Right now, when you talk about the high screen game out at the top of the key, right? Well, he can flash out there and then drop down. He can flash down to the paint, looking to take that feed if the double team comes or if you get caught on the right switch. But what you'd love to be able to do is to set that screen, have a Kyrie Irving take the screen, go towards the lane, and have Claxton be able to drift away if he wants to. The other way is the nice two-man game in around the basket, easy alley-oops, right? The high percentage shots. But just the fact that you could have Claxton drift away and shoot from 15 to 18 feet, that changes the dynamic as well on the offensive end, and then hopefully provides the additional spacing, which again, to go back to this game, the 6 assists. In any of these scenarios, if he can be a threat in that area of the mid-range, then he can also take that pass and then do what Doug and I was referring to the hockey stat, right? Be the extra pass off the pass and then find those perimeter shooters again. So it's a long road, the way that his game's going to evolve. And I just think that this year has been such a big leap forward for him that now you can start dreaming on, can he do this? Can he have the next phase? There's no reason to think that he can't. And I go back to watching the mini documentary on him, where how he was coached by his father initially when he was growing up. He had a very late growth spurt. He was a point guard size player when he entered high school and then really shot up. He had to take time off to let his body develop, to let his back and muscles get stronger, to be able to carry his weight and his length and his size. And that's why you look at these 4 years and say, right, you can kind of see, hey, this is going to be a long-term project, but as he starts to blossom, there's going to be no limit to what his ceiling can be. So I could sit here and do this all night, but I guess we won't do that. I'm going to take a quick look here. Feel free to throw out some questions, but I'm going to take a quick look, see if I can just pull this trade list up. And obviously, one other thing, we didn't mention the episode, no reason to, but the extension for Turner with the Pacers. Anyone that was like dreaming on that, they're going to wait and see and, see how their team develops, having a much better year than they originally anticipated. Who's a good guy too that I wanted to talk about because this just came up. The latest rumor, and I'm going to give it credit right now. I'm over on CBS Sports, but the Trailblazers, Josh Hart, that's one that I think Doug and I'll talk about in terms of a player that you could go after. That would be a really nice piece to add to this team. Nurkic has also been mentioned there as well as being someone that the Blazers would be willing to move as they look to extend Jeremy Grant. The interesting thing for me when it comes to Nurkic, there's the injury concern. Certainly somebody threw out the idea of like, well, Hart and Nurkic, Joe Harris and blah, blah, blah. The money all adds up, but that's not it's just not the way that it works in these situations. But Josh Hart is another name that I'm going to want to touch base with Doug about because I think that he's the kind of player with his size, with his skill set that folds in nicely to this team. And I'll just pull up his stats real quick here before we get out the door because I was just looking at his on-off numbers as well, offensively and defensively. But over with the Blazers, came over last season. So he's shooting significantly less this year than he was a year ago, but still shooting at 50% from the field. He's only taking 2 3-pointers a game, and it's been bad this season, just 33%. Last year, first year with Portland, higher volume, over 6 attempts from beyond the arc, 37%. there as well. But you talk about a guy at 6'4", 215 thrown to the backcourt mix. That would be nice, depending on if you move say you move a Cam Thomas and a second round pick to the Timberwolves for Naz Reid. Maybe you find a way to supplement with something else, send it out to Portland and get a guy back like Josh Hart. That could be a nice little, 2-player combination that improves you in 2 key areas and still gives you some of that perimeter punch that you want to have as well. Yeah, and I would love to have Caruso. If the Bulls decide they're willing to sell, it's going to be it's going to be a high price tag. It's going to be higher than the Nets. Or I want him. I said it months ago. If you listen to the show, I went in on Caruso, and I see there as well. Oh, sorry, that was you, Francisco. Yeah, I see you saying it. They're talking about definitely a first round pick, maybe more than that, and a player, and that's it's a balancing act. If he becomes available and you love it, then go. Cam Thomas, second round pick, Naz Reid, first round pick, and what to Chicago gets you Alex Caruso. But I mean, there's been low level discussions about like multiple ones because everybody wants that defensive backcourt player that can set the table, can take on defensive assignments, has good perimeter shooting. Like, he's the perfect fit for a lot of teams that want to help get the ball out of one of their stars' hands and allow it to alleviate some of that pressure, especially when it comes to setting the table. He's a perfect fit for the Nets. I just don't know if it's going to be a realistic option for them. So that being the case, it's only 9:00 on a Saturday night, but we're going to go ahead and button this one up. I really, really appreciate everybody, especially on a Saturday, man. You could be out on the town doing your thing, but you chose to spend a little bit of time with me here on the Locked On Nets podcast, breaking down a great win for the Nets over the Knicks, keeping their heads above water without Kevin Durant, without Ben Simmons, without TJ Warren. But there you go, though. Short list, right? I mean, all the names included in it: Naz Reid, Caruso, Hart. I mean, listen, I'll talk about Nurkic. I don't think that, again, price tag, but we'll see. I was always a fan of his game as well. I talked about him 2 years ago before they gave him the extension and kept him there, where I thought that would be a player that would be nice to go after and add. The only trick there is, and I'll briefly just mention this on him, is that he's not a three-point shooter at all, obviously. But if you're looking at bigs and you want to add size and you're not worried about the perimeter shooting, and that comes down to what are you sacrificing to get some of these players, which is what makes it different, because people are talking about give up a perimeter shooter in the deal to acquire someone like that. You can obviously be excited about what his game is just from a pure traditional kind of big rebounding. But I will say he has increased this year, is his highest volume. He's actually the last 3 seasons going back to, he only played 8 games that year. Yeah. So the last three seasons, he shot less than 1 per game, 1 per game, and now just over 2 3-point attempts per game. And he's knocking him down at 38.5%. That's not insignificant. The other nice thing about him is he is a career 67% free throw shooter. So you can feel a little bit more comfortable keeping him out there on the court as well and getting to the line. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I thought someone mentioned something else. Never mind. But that being the case, yeah. So we'll break all this stuff down. And if we don't get to them on some of the episodes, because a lot of times there'll be other things to discuss, I'll find ways to get bonus content out onto YouTube, not necessarily in the podcast feed. So make sure you check it on the YouTube channel to make sure that we break down just the mechanics of, can you go acquire this guy? Can we get the money to line up? And what would it mean for the Nets from a rotation standpoint as well? Thank you, my friends, for being a part of this. We really appreciate it. We'll be back again on Monday night, post-game, following the LA Lakers matchup at Barclays Center. Thanks again for being with us. We'll be back again next time, talking all things Brooklyn Nets basketball.